Welcome back, Flick Knaves. It feels so good to be back and talking to you all. I'm Lupinefiasco, and today I'm going to review the Cindra deck list that I played in the Pro Tour and Calling Singapore that got me 45th place and $200 from the Calling, and my buddy 23rd place and $300. I'll then recap my tournament and takeaway for those interested, and finally show you some of the pictures that I took while traveling and give you a little travelogue. Before that, please consider subscribing to my channel. It's the best free way to support me and to make sure that you see every new upload from Daily Fab Gameplay. You can find a Fabry link to the deck list I'll be talking about in the video description below. You'll also find a link to my Patreon page where subscribers get access to matchup guides for all of my tournament decks, including this one, and weekly bonus content, including draft reviews and deck techs. The matchup guide for this deck will also be posted to Metafy for those who prefer to buy on that platform. Want to tighten and optimize your gameplay in real life? Use my affiliate link in the video description to buy your very own Codex Journal, and be sure to use code LUPINE10, that's LUPINE10, at checkout to receive 10% off your order. Finally, Daily Fab Gameplay is brought to you in part by Hemel from The Bazaar. It's never been more affordable to play in the flesh and blood. Players have been buying the cards they need from Hemel for years. I started shopping from him in 2023 and have never found a better deal. The Bazaar's prices are the lowest for singles, full sets, and class sets, including new releases. High Seas singles and more are available now and ship both internationally and domestically. Message Hemel on Blue Sky, Discord, email, or Twitter to see what he can do for you. Let's get started. I'm not exactly breaking the mold with this Cindra list, and if you've been following the hero's progression at all through the last national season, then all of these cards should look familiar to you. This list is kind of a combination of a few different lists, and I'll review kind of what I was thinking going into the tournament, how I built this deck and why I built it the way that I did. You can see that this is a 56 card main board, and I'll be boarding up into a 60 card deck, and I'll review some of the strategy there, but of course the goodies are all on Patreon if you want to know exactly how I was planning to board into all of my matchups. Our equipment loadout here is extremely standard: Mask of Momentum, Flick Knives, Blood Splattered Vest, Dragon Scalar Flight Path, and 2 Kunai of Retribution. If you're not familiar with Cindra, the idea is that you want to Flick Knives at least once in a turn to keep your Mask of Momentum chain alive, as well as push some true damage. Most decks have a hard time preventing unblockable damage. That also lets you use your Blood Splattered Vest if you need an extra resource to pay for any of your one-cost attacks. Scrolling down to the main deck, you'll see that we only have 5 blues in the main board, we only have 5 blues in the entire 80 cards overall, and 1 yellow in Brand of Cinderclaw, so it is usually difficult for us to pay for our Art of Dragon Fires, Breaking Points, Demonstrate Devotions, or Hunt the Hunters. We can cheat that with Blood Splattered Vest, we can cheat it with Art of the Dragon Blood if we are able to make it Draconic, we can cheat it with Ignite, but Blood Splattered Vest is that real on-board way to make sure that we can always pay for any of our attacks, no matter what. Talking about what exactly is in the 56 card main board here, we have a lot of the staples that you are very likely familiar with. 3 copies of Ancestral Empowerment isn't something that I was playing with in earlier iterations of Cindra. The card is just very good. It can be awkward. Few attacks in the deck are not ninja cards when you might need them to be. Ravenous Rabble, Oath of Loyalty, Lava Burst, Hunt the Hunter, Snatch. These are not ninja cards. You cannot use Ancestral Empowerment on them. Ancestral Empowerment can't target a weapon, so you can't use it on a kunai. But in the times where it doesn't actually help your current turn, it blocks for 3. It's a great card to put into your arsenal to help you trigger Mask Momentum on a future turn. The best use case for Ancestral Empowerment is to use it on a 3-power attack when your opponent has blocked 3, to get it over the top of that block hit your break point, trigger Mask of Momentum, and draw a card from the Empowerment. Outside of that, we have 3 copies of Art of the Dragon Blood. That's pretty standard. 2 copies of Art of the Dragon Fire. I played around with this a lot, maybe going down to 1 copy. I tried it with 0 copies, but 1 for 2 damage plus 5 physical is just way too good to not be playing. It's a great finisher. It's a great way to just end a game against a low-life opponent. The only way to stop the 2 damage from Dragonfire is with damage prevention. It is an arcane damage, so Arcane Barrier doesn't get your opponent there. Plays Headlong, 0 for 4 with Go Again is insane. We want to play as many of those as we can, though you'll notice that I'm not playing cards like Cut Through. I don't want to put so much power in my opponent's hand to stop my attack. Cut Through, 0 for 3. If you've hit with a dagger this turn, you get the +1 and Go Again. But against cards like Shelter from the Storm, Sawbones, Mental Block, you can just find yourself in this position where Cut Through doesn't do anything, and if that was the card you needed to start your turn, then that can be very, very devastating. Blood Runs Deep is a card that I like having 2 of. As a 3 of, it felt like I saw it too often. Yes, it is many times a 0 for 4, but you really want it in combination with Wrath of Retribution or Spreading Flames to get the most value out of your daggers. A lot of the time with Blood Runs Deep, you find yourself needing either a very large hand to get both your Blood Runs Deep attack trigger and value from Flick Knives, or you need your opponent to be blocking in such a way that you actually do get to play the Blood Runs Deep and then attack on Chainlink 4 and get that blocked, and then Flick Knives and then have another attack on Chainlink 5. Or it's a turn where you say, I'm not trying to push Mask of Momentum, I'm not sequencing for that, I'm just dealing as much damage as I can. And sometimes Cindra is really good at doing that, and that is what the situation calls for. But as a 3 of, I was just finding too often that I had these turns that really didn't work for Mask of Momentum, and of course that is what Cindra does best. That is what we're trying to do most of the time. But as a 1 of, I wasn't seeing the effect often enough. I did win at least 1 game over the Singapore weekend by killing someone at 1 life with a Blood Runs Deep after my Flick Knives had already been used. So we do really value that effect. Brain of the Cinderclaw is a card that Cindra will always play 3 of until the day she LLs. Breaking Point is something I went back and forth on. It's a very strong effect, but depending on what you're playing against, you might not ever trigger it. So against Gravy, I found that Breaking Point was usually very good. Gravy decks were only on 2 or 3 defense reactions, so if they did Arsenal something, there's a good chance that they can't just play it in response to the Breaking Point. But against the other heroes that I was expecting to see a lot of, Verdance, Slippy, Prism, Cindra, Breaking Point just isn't very good. Verdance either has the defense reaction in Arsenal or can block the Breaking Point. Slippy, same thing. Cindra, generally not arsenaling cards in the mirror because of Breaking Point. So it can just be awkward, and when it doesn't do anything on the Rupture, you're playing a 1 for 5 with no additional text. And we have other 1 for 5s with very good text. Art of the Dragon Fire, Take the Tempo, Hunt the Hunter. Breaking Point was a card that I wanted the effect of, but I didn't want it enough to play 3 copies. This 80 has 2. I wasn't playing the second Breaking Point during Singapore, and I think that was a mistake. It came back to bite me. So I've retroactively added 1 in. Specifically, that extra copy of Breaking Point is for Basilio, though you will play it in all of your aggro matchups. Demonstrate Devotion as a 3 of felt mandatory over the course of the weekend. I've gone back and forth between 2 and 3 copies because it can be awkward. It blocks 2, it's a 1 for 4, it doesn't naturally have Go Again. Yeah, you can kind of cheat the effect with your daggers if you can pay for it, but that means that you have to find a way to put a dagger on the combat chain, either with Flick Knives or paying for it. And if you have a hand of all reds, then you need to pitch a red to attack with the dagger. The dagger also needs to hit, or you need to have something with Go Again to flick to throw your dagger to Blood Splattered Fest to demonstrate Devotion. It can be awkward. But as I played this list, I found that it is very fealty hungry. Between Demonstrate Devotion, Display Loyalty, and Hunt the Hunter, we are capable of making 9 fealty. We can also make it with Hot on Their Heels, but that is a card that most players have identified as a need to block effect in Cindra. Hunt the Hunter generally marks unconditionally. Demonstrate Devotion and Display Loyalty make unconditional fealty. It's very good. There were multiple games that I played where I, at one point, had banked 4 fealty and would use all of them by the end of the game. We need fealty in Cindra, and specifically in lists like this, where we're playing Ravenous Rabble, Snatch, Art of the Dragon Blood, Art of the Dragon Fire, and my list doesn't even go as far as lists like what Pudding Tam was running in his national event with Cut Through and Pain in the Backside. Fealty's very good in Cindra. It's something that we need a lot of, as much as we can get. 3 copies of Demonstrate Devotion. Display Loyalty is a lot easier to justify 3 copies of. It is a conditional head jab, and when it is an unconditional head jab, it's very good. Fire Tenant Strike First, another non-draconic card that you may need fealty to get the most value out of, but in general, this is a 0 for 4. Hot on Their Heels is a conditional head jab. It blocks 3. It marks on hit. That's a really strong effect. Hunt the Hunter was a card that I think I started on 1 copy of and just generally cranked up to 3 as I began to understand the value of fealty in this deck. And by the end of the tournament, I was extremely happy to be playing 3 copies. I really would cut this 1 breaking point or the 2nd Art of the Dragonfire before I considered cutting the 3rd Hunt the Hunter. It's just that strong. Ignite is another very strong card. It can at times be underwhelming, but it does let you send Ignite into a dagger, into a 3rd attack to threaten Mask of Momentum on a 2-card hand. It also lets you play these 2-card hands of Ignite Hunt the Hunter. If you have fealty, you can Ignite fealty Art of the Dragonfire for a 2-card 9. You get to Flick Knives at some point in there. Ignite is not a card that I would ever consider cutting. It can be underwhelming if you also draw a blue that would have let you pay for the dagger that Ignite would be paying for. But in general, Ignite is just that strong. Lava Burst is a very strong finisher. It isn't something that I wanted 3 copies of. I took inspiration from Pudding Tam's list to go down to 2 and found that that was good. I did not follow his example and go to 1. This list has Mask of the Pouncing Lynx in it, so I did want to have the density of finishers that I can tutor with Mask of the Pouncing Lynx, but I was happy not to be playing 3 copies of Lava Burst in general. We want our finishers to have extra effects. Art of the Dragon Fire deals 2 damage if it's Draconic. Breaking Point destroys an arsenal. Hunt the Hunter marks on attack. So Lava Burst just doesn't quite do enough. Oath of Loyalty is another card that doesn't quite do enough to play 3 copies of. It's also incredibly awkward if you draw 2 in the same hand, but I do like the effect. Having that 0 for 4 go against starter was often very good. There were only a handful of times that drawing 2 in the same hand or drawing the 2nd copy after a Mask of Momentum trigger really were that bad. For the most part, it was just 0 for 4 go again, and that was good. The hands where it wasn't good, it blocked 3. Ravenous Rabble generally attacks for 4. Sometimes it attacks for 2. You have 5 blues in your deck, and Ravenous Rabble usually finds one of them on top, but when it finds a red instead, it's just very strong. Rising Resentment is another powerful effect in Cindra. We do have a number of 1-cost attacks that we are happy to discount. The nice thing about having Gravy in the meta is that you can send a Draconic attack at Gravy's face, follow up with a Rising Resentment to attack one of Gravy's allies. Rising Resentment is on hit, not when it hits a hero, so if you send a dagger or another head jab at Gravy's face, then send Rising Resentment at a Swabby, kill it, Rising Resentment triggers, you can banish a 1-cost attack from your hand, and then play it for free later on in the turn. But outside of that, if we're playing Ronin Renegade, which is Draconic Head Jab with no text, we're definitely playing Rising Resentment, which is Draconic Head Jab with text. Speaking of Ronin Renegade, We unfortunately still need to play it in our Draconic Ninja decks. It's a 0 cost, 3 power, 2 block attack with Go Again. It's not bad, but coming off of Aurora, who was just playing a deck full of 0 for 4s, Ronin Renegade is pretty weak, but it works with our hero, it works with Blood Runs Deep, it works with all of our Draconic extenders that need 2 Draconic links on the chain to have Go Again. We have to play Ronin Renegade. Snatch is a card that I really like as a 2 of, sort of the same reason as Lava Burst, where we have other finishers. So we can't always make room for Snatch. It also isn't naturally Draconic. It's a card that you need fealty for if you want to break your Dragon Scalar flight path to potentially give Snatch Go Again after it hits. The fact that it isn't Draconic makes it a little awkward. If it was Draconic, I'd be playing 3 copies. But sometimes you just don't have the fealty to get the most out of your Snatch, and that can be a problem. Wrath of Retribution is a card that I would probably play 3 of if I could, but the fact that I can only play 1 means that I value it that much more. I'm not playing it in every matchup, but I'm playing it in most of them. Finally, we come to the blues, Concealed Blade, and Throw Dagger. Why am I playing blues at all? We saw Pudding Tam's list win with 0 blues in his 80. It's not because I'm afraid of Jarl, it's because I like being able to pay for daggers when I need to, specifically against Gravy Bones. Now, I'm always playing the blues, and I'm always happy to pitch them for dagger, 1 cost attack. But against Gravy specifically, they are very good because they help us solve the sequencing puzzle. How do we kill certain allies while also triggering Mask of Momentum? Your daggers do count towards your Mask of Momentum hit chain. They don't count towards the Mask of Momentum effect. If a dagger is the 3rd chain link in a row to hit, you won't draw your card. But if you sequence your turn like dagger, Hunt the Hunter, the Hunt the Hunter would draw a card. Daggers 1 and 2 counted as chain links 1 and 2. So that helps with allies like Chum. You can pitch a blue, send a dagger at Gravy's face. Whether Gravy does or doesn't activate Chum, you can then send a dagger at Chum, then Hunt the Hunter at Chum, kill it, draw a card with Mask of Momentum. You can send dagger, Demonstrate Devotion at Chum to kill Chum. In a deck full of head jabs, killing Chum isn't the most important example, but something like a Rigor Mortis says that we can kill Rigor with 1/3 of a blue instead of needing to send an entire attack at the Rigor Mortis. Even something like an Ignite, you're spending half of a card and overkill to kill Rigor, but pitching a blue to dagger a Rigor is going to get you the most efficient clear while also working towards your Mask of Momentum. We also just have good text on our blues. Throw Dagger is the better of the 2, which is why we're playing 3 copies of Throw Dagger compared to 2 copies of Concealed Blade. Throw Dagger is an extra Flick Knives effect that also draws you a card if the dagger hits. That keeps your Mask of Momentum alive. It pushes true damage. It can give you a new card to play with. It's just good. You get a nice interaction where you can activate Flick Knives to throw a dagger, say your opponent responds by discarding Shelter from the Storm or activating their Sawbones. You can respond to that by playing Throw Dagger and sacrificing the dagger that had already been flicked to deal 1 damage, draw a card. Concealed Blade, not as good, as I said. We're really playing it just for the +1. The same way that Ancestral Empowerment can get you over the top of a block, so can Concealed Blade. You won't draw your card. Concealed Blade doesn't have that text. That's why it is bad Ancestral Empowerment. But even the dagger replacement effect isn't bad. Against Gravy, who's playing Sunken Treasure, and can flip one of your kunais over, you can get a Claw of Vinserikai. Against other heroes, maybe you've already used your Blood Runs Deep, you can Conceal Blade, pick up your Claw of Vinserikai, then flick it later in the turn. The fact that we are playing Claw of Vinserikai in the inventory for certain arcane heroes means that Conceal Blade just gets that much better. We would potentially be playing it for the +1 on a 3 block, but the fact that the other line of text is sometimes relevant is just good. It's nice. We like that. So those are the 56 cards in the main board. I'm playing these most of the time. You'll have to refer to my matchup guide on Patreon to see when am I taking certain cards out. But let's talk about the 18 cards in the inventory and just a few examples of when I might bring these in, and you're going to want the matchup guide for the full list. My thought process going into Singapore was I'm going to identify the 5 decks that I think I will see the most, not necessarily the best 5 decks in the format, but what do I think is going to be represented, and then build my sideboard for those. So the 5 heroes that I identified as being the most prevalent in Singapore, in no particular order, are Cindra, Gravy, Slippy, Prism, and Verdance. And that list was derived from what I was seeing from Nationals and what I thought was going to be the reaction to what we were all seeing from Nationals. So if I am looking at Cindra first, it doesn't have to be Cindra, it could be any aggro deck. I weirdly, in 18 rounds of Classic Constructed, never played against another Cindra, but I did play against Dash.io and Acilio. It's sort of the premier other aggro decks in the format. So against these heroes, we're bringing in cards like Breaking Point, Spreading Flames, Branded Cinderclaw, because we are worried less about blocking, we're worried more about doing our thing just better. Spreading Flames is really good at doing our thing just better. Against Slippy, we have defense reactions, Loyalty Beyond the Grave and Shelter from the Storm. Against Prism, of course, we have Rally the Coast Guard as a 7-power popper, but playing Rally instead of a card like Battlefront Bastion or Blanche because of the additional text on Rally the Coast Guard. In that, say, Prism uses her Dreamweavers or has Passing Mirage out, then attacks with Herald of Erudition. We can discard to Rally the Coast Guard's effect to block 5, or say we block Herald of Erudition with our Rally, and Prism plays Celestial Reprimand to lower the attack of Rally the Coast Guard. We can activate the ability, discard a card from hand. Now we're blocking for a 5. I don't like bringing defense reactions in against Prism, so the additional text of Battlefront Bastion really doesn't matter. I don't want to block with more than one card on any given turn from Prism. And Blanche is a card that, yeah, we could technically play. We have 5 blues in our deck. Maybe there's a world that we have full tempo against Prism, and Blanche is just a 7-power finisher with a really relevant effect. The times where that happens are so minimal, and the benefit by having text on Blanche offensively is so much lower than the value of having text on Rally defensively, that for me, Rally the Coast Guard is the only good choice. We've got Spreading Flames for our aggro package, we've got Brand with Cinderclaw for our aggro package. Salt the Wound, Tenacity, and Mask of the Pouncing Lynx are always coming in at the same time. There is never a point where I'm playing Mask of the Pouncing Lynx and not playing Salt the Wound and Tenacity. These are our 2 very good tutorable finishers. Lava Burst is always there as just 0 for 5 if we go 4 chain links wide. Salt the Wound can be good on your big turns where your opposing hero isn't blocking. All of those dagger hits do count towards Salt the Wound. And Tenacity is in for the flip side when your defensive opponent is blocking everything and you manage to hit one time. Maybe you have Ancestral Empowerment or Conceal Blade, or your opponent just didn't have the number of cards necessary to block all of your chain links. And Tenacity does more than 5 points of damage. That's really the use case for Salt the Wound or Tenacity compared to Lava Burst. Did you hit 3 or more times in a turn? Well, now Salt the Wound is better than Lava Burst because you got 5 points, whereas Lava Burst is always +3 if you can go 4 chain links wide. Did your opponent block 3 or more times and you can find Tenacity? Cool, now Tenacity is worth as much or more than Lava Burst, but is harder to get that value out of later, so you find Tenacity now. Claw of Ensarakai is in the deck specifically for Wizards. You want this against your Kano, your Verdance, and your Acilio. Against Kano, it's a lot worse, but against Kano, Cindra is a lot worse. So you bring it in as like, maybe it's enough. It probably isn't. You don't bring Cindra if you think that Kano is going to be prevalent in your meta. Kano was missing from my top 5 list of heroes, and so I just didn't respect him. Lo and behold, did not play against him the entire weekend. Flamescale Furnace is here for the heroes that you think you will want to block against, as well as the games that you think will go for short enough of a time that you wouldn't be getting your full 3 points of value from Blood Splattered Vest. And Mask of the Pouncing Lynx is there for your heroes that will be blocking as part of their game plan. Think something like a Guardian, where they don't have a problem blocking on Chain Links 2 and 3 to stop your momentum trigger, and in fact that is how they derive so much value. Guardian, as an example, traditionally doesn't have very much go again on their attacks. A Guardian cannot easily convert 4 cards on their turn, but if they can convert 2 cards on your turn defensively, then they can do much more with a 2-card hand than a 4-card hand. And that's when we would bring in Mask of the Pouncing Lynx. Finally, we'll take a quick look at our maybe board and specifically Exposed. This is not a card that I brought this weekend, but it is a card that I really wish that I had thought about and might be something that I want to consider later. The reason to play Exposed is the same reason that we would play Concealed Blade. It gets +1, it's bad ancestral empowerment, but like I said, Cindra is so hungry for fealty, and if I was losing games, a trend across most of them was that I didn't have enough fealty to get full value out of my Cindra hero text. I couldn't recur both of my daggers, or I couldn't get the extra value out of Art of Dragon Fire, or I needed to use Art of the Dragon Blood as a finisher. Exposed being a way to mark the defending hero, give them an extra, give you an extra fealty, and still get your +1 for Mask of Momentum is just better than Concealed Blade. And the fact that Exposed doesn't block is potentially bad. The fact that Slippy was the most played deck in Pro Tour Singapore, and I believe in the Calling Singapore, means that maybe Exposed can't be played if the Slippy flicks you and you have the defense reaction to cover whatever their follow-up was, Mark the Black Widow, Leave No Witnesses, and you start your turn marked, you cannot play Exposed. In those cases, you can usually pitch to attack with Dagger 1 cost. It isn't a card that I considered, it's a card that I wish I had considered, and I think my testing leading up to Singapore would have led me towards playing Exposed, and I think it would have been better. Maybe at least one of my losses over the weekend could have become a win with 1 more fealty from the Exposed. So as you are testing Cindra, preparing for Calling Kansas City, or whatever event, ProQuest, Armory, try swapping 2 copies of Exposed with 2 copies of Concealed Blade and just see how often you're punished by being marked and not being able to play Exposed, or needing to block for 3 and not having a block value on Exposed. I think you're going to be impressed with it. So that is the full deck. This is available publicly. As I've said, you can go through Patreon, either subscribe monthly at the Arc Lightning tier or buy the single post to get the matchup guide that will be available on Patreon. I'll be making a video talking about my general philosophy in all of the matchups, but specifically you will be able to click on this tab and have there actually be usable information. So that's Cindra. Let's talk about kind of the overall weekend. How did I prepare? What were my thoughts during, after? Why did I bring Cindra is a great first question. The thumbnail for this video gives you my feelings on Cindra, which is that she is a bad deck. If you ran into me at the Pro Tour or the Calling and asked me about the deck that I brought, I was not shy in telling you Cindra is a bad deck. If anyone was talking to me about the Pro Tour or the Calling, they would ask, so you're on Slippy, right? And I would say, no, I'm on Cindra. I should have been playing Slippy. I fully admit, Cindra was a bad call for the Pro Tour and the Calling. So why was I playing Cindra? There are 2 reasons. The first being that I allowed myself to be talked out of preparing Slippy when I was prepping for Singapore. I had an idea. I wanted to test if I locked a hero a month before the PT, and then just spent a month practicing the bad matchups, or at least the matchups that I'm expecting to see. Gravy, Cindra, Slippy, Prism, Verdance. How well does that go? I've been a little down on myself lately, and on my results over the last few events. Just felt like I wasn't prepping very well, was coming close to cashing, but not quite getting there, and I wanted to see, okay, let's just focus on prepping for the matchups that I'm going to see. Give myself a month, which meant that I needed to lock a hero a month before the PT, and a month before the PT, data did not support Slippy being good. Data supported Cindra being good, because Gravies had not adapted to what Cindra was trying to do. Florian was still being played. The meta really supported Cindra. And by the time PT comes around, Cindra has fallen off massively, Gravies have adapted, Florian is not being played, Slippy has really risen to prominence as a reaction to Cindra, which is something that I predicted, but let myself be talked out of. So a month before the PT, Cindra is the best aggro deck, and it's the deck that I decide I'm going to start getting reps on. By the time we get to the PT, Cindra is obviously bad. Slippy is a deck that I have some experience with, but not a ton. And I wanted to test how good my prep was. I knew that Cindra was going to be a bad deck, but it's the deck that I had worked on for the last month. It's the deck that I had tested all the matchups into. And if I was going to sit down with Slippy, sure, if I play against enemy Slippies or Cindras or aggro decks, yeah, I can manage those pretty well. Those matchups are generally very easy to play. But if I sit down against a Gravy, or especially if I sit down against a Verdance, I don't know how to navigate that matchup, and I feel like I'm going to lose games just because I hadn't prepared. So by the time we get to Singapore, I decided I'm going to play Cindra this entire weekend. It's going to get me good results for the deck tech and matchup guide that I'm going to post on Patreon. It's going to let me test whether my prep for the weekend was good, and it is going to give me experience in case I do end up playing Cindra again at some point. Why would I ever play a bad deck again? Because to parrot the Runaways, she is a B tier deck with an S tier attitude. Sometimes your matchup spread does say that Cindra is good. In the beginning of National Season, when it is Gravies who are playing 20 plus allies and can't block your Mask of Momentum, or it is Florian who can't keep up with your damage output while also doing his decompose thing, you can win games with Cindra, and she can do very well. To summarize, am I happy that I brought Cindra to the PT? No. Am I happy that I played Cindra for the PT? Yeah. My Pro Tour ended 4-4. Just like London, I went 3-2 in Constructed, then 1-2 in Draft. Followed by the Calling, I ended up going 8-5. I came in 45th, which was just barely enough to cash. And while I'm not super thrilled with that, I would have liked to have done better, and I feel like maybe I could have navigated those matchups on day 2 a little bit better to get there. Maybe I was hamstrung by the power of my deck. Ran into a Slippy on day 2 who just walked me. Ran into a Dio who went just a little bit faster than I did. Ran into an Acilio who just didn't even draw so well themselves, but my deck just gave me a handful of ignites and head jabs that really wasn't good enough to push the damage. I was happy to go 8-5 in cash. If you've listened to my last tournament reports, you know that I've had this trend of kind of dropping on like round 12 of the Calling because I was losing games, didn't want to lose elo, wanted to preserve that mental energy, and it's the wrong way to look at it. This event, I really tried to focus on treating every game as preparation for the next game, which meant that I was going to play out as much of the Calling as I could. And I'm glad that I did. I think if I had this mentality where I'm going to preserve elo and preserve mental, I would not have played my last round of the Calling. When I was 8-4, I thought, there's no way that I'm going to cash. This game is a waste of time. Maybe I win, but like, does that, what if I lose instead? And if I had not played that game, yeah, I would have gone elo positive. I went negative for the weekend, but I also would have been down $200, and I wouldn't have learned as much about the Cindra-Acilio matchup as I did. And you've just heard me tell you that I retroactively swapped Breaking Point with, it was a yellow brand with Cinderclaw, and it's because of that Acilio game really showing me I need more power and I need more disruption in my deck if I'm going to play against enemy aggro heroes. So I'm proud of my performance, just in that I played out the event, I learned as much as I could, and managed to scrape min cash with 45th place. I learned that my preparation was enough, at least for CC. This strategy of identifying the 5 heroes in the meta that I think I'm going to run into the most, and then practice exclusively against those, was good. I didn't play against exclusively those heroes. I never played against Cindra in 18 rounds of CC, but I played against other hyper-aggro decks that work on a similar axis of victory, and found, yeah, Cindra generally is not good enough to win these games. I lost to every Acilio I played, I lost to the Dash.io. Cindra just doesn't do the thing consistently enough. She's very linear, she's very restricted to just playing the hand that she's dealt, whereas Acilio, Dash.io to an extent, and rest in peace Aurora, had this flexibility in navigating their draws to compensate for when they would get dealt a bad hand, when they would draw 4 kind of subpar cards, and could navigate that into a better turn later. And Cindra really just doesn't have that, at least in my experience. My draft prep needed some work. I was given advice that I really like, which is identify the hero that is perceived to be the worst in draft. In the case of High Seas, that's Puffin. Figure out how to 3-0 with Puffin and then do that. And that is a way that you can get points in draft without having to spend a ton of time learning to read signals, learning how to play 3 different heroes. You can just learn to play 1. And because you're forcing the bad hero, generally you're not going to get cut. And I thought that was really good advice. I'm going to have a video coming out later this week with how I'm planning to maybe make some adjustments to the channel and my posting schedule so that I have more time to test. But when it comes down to it, I don't have as much time to test Flesh and Blood as I'd like. And finding these ways to cut corners and really just focus on prepping for the event rather than the meta, while not great, I mean, cutting corners is not what I want to be doing, it is necessary for someone like me who just can't devote as much time as he would want to. So, am I happy with how Pro Tour and Calling Singapore went? Not quite. I would have liked to do better in both events, but am I happy with my progress coming off of some pretty poor finishes in previous events? Yeah, I am. I would count the weekend as a success. I also got to just do some exploring. This is a photo reel of everything that I saw. I went with my partner to Singapore. We did some exploring. You know, we got there on Wednesday morning ahead of the Pro Tour, which started Friday morning. So we only got 2 real days of exploring, and I had to spend a lot of that prepping for the event, drafting with teammates, getting some last-minute CC in, which I'm really glad I did. We didn't get to see as much of Singapore as I would have liked to. I was really dedicated to food. We went to Chinatown, we went to Little India, we went to a few different hawker stations. I mean, it was such good food for such low price, and even lower considering that we were paying with United States dollars, which was a much higher conversion rate to Singapore dollars. The weather was atrocious. I think anyone that you talk to about Singapore would tell you, regardless of how they feel about the city as a whole, the weather sucked. We're talking 80% humidity starting at like 8 in the morning, which is terrible. The event itself was really well run. Coming out of London, where James White's keynote was delivered through a bad sound system to a group of players all just circled around him while I think he stood on a chair, we instead got this massive stage with big screens, a professional sound system, everyone could hear him all across the room, so we all got to sit at tables. If you watched the keynote online, it was really good, such an improvement from what it used to be. that was incredible. The venue was good, properly air conditioned, which was huge. Again, terrible weather in Singapore. And it was just a really good event. I was really happy to be there. The beach party was fun. I'm glad that I went. I do feel like we were all misled. I think we were all under the impression that we were going to get free drinks all night, and what we instead got was 3 drink vouchers. And on the one hand, I was disappointed because I paid $100, got a souvenir towel, which was cool, got a treasure pack where I opened like Expedition to Dreadfall Reach, or one of the bad ones. So I was like, I gotta get my money's worth from this ticket. I gotta get my money. I'm gonna get paid in free drinks. And only having the 3 vouchers, that I didn't get my money's worth. But at the same time, it was super hot at the beach party. Yeah, it was dark, but it was still hot and humid. People were not drinking as much water as they should have. And I think if you had put a bunch of card players in an environment with an open bar in a 5-hour event, there would have been some deaths by the end of it through alcohol poisoning. So probably good that we got cut off from the drink vouchers. James White showed up maybe 3 hours into the event, gave a good speech. Everyone cheered for him. He was passing out cold foil, extended our gold kiss rum. That was cool. I got a picture with him. I got a picture with Majin, where you can now be the judge of who's the best looking brunette white man in Flesh and Blood. So it was a great event. Finished in Singapore, flew to Tokyo Monday night, spent 4 days in Tokyo. That was a ton of fun. Better weather, a little hotter, but much less humid. Being from California, that's my kind of weather. Great food. My first time eating real, authentic ramen. It was incredible. Paying $5 for a big bowl of ramen. I just couldn't stop eating it. You start, and it was like I couldn't put the chopsticks down until we finished. My partner and I went to a sushi bar. So we had our little conveyor belt of sushi, but we could also put in orders on a touchscreen, and they'd be sent down to our chairs. And that was great. She had a foot injury that somehow happened. We couldn't figure out what it was, but she couldn't walk around as much as we would have liked to, so we spent more time in the hotel than I think either of us wanted, but still, the view from the hotel was incredible. We were getting good drinks, good food, just a really good trip overall. It was my second time leaving the country to go to Singapore and Tokyo, and I'm really glad I did. They say, Flesh and Blood, play the game, see the world, and that's what I'm getting to do, and it's just really great. So that's my travels, it's my tournament reflections, that's my deck tech. I hope you've enjoyed it all. If you're still here, thank you for sticking around. I'm super glad to be able to share this with all of you. Head over to Patreon. I'll have a matchup guide posted for Cindra, how I'm boarding in all of the matchups of every existing hero. Of course, I'm a little fresher on the specific heroes that I was prepping for. Later this week, I want to give a channel update. I also want to talk about the new rules for Pro Quest Yokohama and my thoughts and feelings on not being able to continue playing if I win a Pro Quest. But thank you for being here for as long as you have been. Until the next time I see you on Daily Fab Gameplay, take care.